Sitenzare, bedelasnem ikkere belen, igna je bedelnen ikkeren demenil, awada fetna matagban, kakifu adenenen fi internantana, highly maskam lisleal.
In the name of the African ancestors who began the march of humankind in the womb of Mother Africa, we ask these ancestors to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of the African ancestors who began the march of humankind in the womb of Mother Africa and marched down the Nile, laying the foundations for human civilization and culture, we ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of these African ancestors who built their pyramids and their temples to their God concepts, to their principles, and to their moral values, who left us a legacy of architectural and monumental building unparalleled in the history of the world, we ask these ancestors who built the pyramids, who built the temples, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask these African ancestors who took this African culture and extended it throughout Africa, building the stone cities of Zimbabwe, building the empires of the Sudan, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, building the Swahili city-states along the east coast of Africa, and in Christian Africa asking King Lalibela and giving him the courage to build the 12 churches of Lalibela from the ground down, monuments to the world. We ask these Africans who spread this culture to the Dogo and to the Akan and to the Yoruba and to the Bankango and to the Zulu. We ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. In the name of the Africans who opened up Africa, opened up the Nile Valley to other cultures and other peoples, and they came in and nurtured themselves on the African greatness. First coming in early were the ancient Hebrews, and they synthesized this culture and produced Judaism. Later coming in were the Christians, and they synthesized this culture and produced Christianity. Coming in were also the Greeks, who took the African culture, synthesized it, and produced Greek civilization. And then later, the Prophet Muhammad, and with the Arabs coming into the Nile Valley, they synthesized the culture and produced Islam. We ask these African ancestors, who as part of their legacy laid the foundations for Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and Greek civilization, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask those African ancestors pulled out of Africa, taken to the hells of North America, South America, the Caribbean, maintaining the spirit of African humanity in their hearts and in their minds, and who left us this enormous legacy of struggle. We ask those Africans who resisted enslavement in the villages of Africa, who resisted enslavement in the shores of Africa, who resisted enslavement in those forts and dungeons, who resisted enslavement in the holes of those ships, who resisted enslavement when they arrived on these shores in the New World. We ask these Africans who ran into the highlands of northeast Brazil and established for 100 years the first free republic in the Americas, the Republic of Palmares, and their last great leader, Zumbi, whose spirit and sacrifice. We ask these Africans who replicated the Brazilian experience and went into the highlands of Jamaica and became the maroon-free communities. We ask these Africans who went into the backwoods of the Guyanas and Suriname and created free republic of the Suramaka and the Ajuka. We ask these Africans who went into the backwoods of Georgia and the swamps of Florida and moved with the Seminole Indians and resisted oppression. We ask these Africans who left us a legacy of struggle and resistance, the likes of which no one in the world has, to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future. We ask these Africans who created and laid for us a foundation of struggle and resistance that was passed on generation after generation, that was passed on to Harriet Tubman, who fought her way out of enslavement and became a symbol of freedom for all of us. Similarly, Frederick Douglass and hundreds of thousands of others fought their way out of enslavement. We asked those Africans who went with Boukman Dessalines to create the greatest revolutionary experience in the history of the world, the Haitian Revolution, leaving us a legacy, the likes of which no one else has had. We ask these Africans to be with us, to strengthen us, and give us a vision for the future.
Let us start our class with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Bhagavan Krishna, Mahavatar Babaji, Larry Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswarji, our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, We bow to all of you. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, great gurus, receive our love, receive our desire to love you more, to attune our hearts and minds with your great presence. Om. Peace.
My name is Kabu Ma'at Kheru.
Is to be a world people. Without the African connection, we are a disjointed people, begging for the entry into somebody else's house.
All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running African. And I'm going to go to the phone lines right now. I want to come forward after our first interview to just talk a little bit about some things that are on my mind. At 7 o'clock, we're going to go to our second interview. And my sister, Angela Morris, is standing by. She is in the UK. She's an author. She's the author of the book, Don't Let Them Stop You. It's personal. Now, you have to read that book, but you'll first be introduced to her. If you haven't read the book or not introduced to Angela as yet, this morning inside of this space, it's going to be talking to her about that. And later on in the program, another delight for us. We're going to absolutely love this conversation. Let me get this. Okay, going to absolutely love this conversation with our brother, Dr. Kimani S.K. Nehusi. That's how we're rolling this morning. So stand by for those interviews. In the meantime, going to the phone lines to speak with my sister, Empress Love I, member of the House of Sabre, who is an active member of the RMO. She's based in St. Anne. Empress Love I is a respected sisterin within the Rastafari community. You might recognize her name. She's known for her commitment to helping others and also for social justice. She's an advocate for social justice. Through her work with the House of Sabre and other entities across the island, Empress Love I strives to educate others about the importance of embracing the Rastafari way of life. We go to the phone lines where my sister is standing by. Empress Love I. How are you doing, my sister?
Greetings, my sister.
Greetings.
Greetings.
Yeah,
in His Imperial Majesty. Dear Lucky.
Greetings to you too. You have a very noisy background. I'm not quite sure if it is something that you can address or you can fix.
No, it's not. I supposed to have a drive to come inside,
Mm-hmm.
Inside the studio.
Yes.
And I'm still waiting on the drive that is taking me, should take me there,
Okay, well, never mind. Let's just, next time, we understand. Maybe you're not supposed to be on the road. So I suppose what we're hearing is just traffic passing by because you're standing waiting for the ride.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, goodness. All right, my sister, let's make do with what we have then. I'm so sorry. I hope you're safe enough where you're standing.
I'm safe.
Okay, all right, brilliant. So one of the things we want to talk about is what the House of Sabre is involved with now, and members from the House of Sabre were in studio with me, I think months before last, talking about Empress Love I getting away, man, because that's like one big truck.
Oh my God! I'm trying to walk away from the noise.
Yes, God, I wanted to do it for a while ago. All right. So, well, let me just go quickly and get you off the phone, but we want to get this out. So there is there is a project and an activity that's coming up on Wednesday, May 15, and that is in relation to Rastafari and all of the ongoings on and the ongoings regarding ganja and the legalization or decriminalization or sacramental rights and all these discussions and activities that are taking place, and where and how Rastafari is situated in all of this. The House of Sabre is gearing up now to address this. So tell us a little bit of the background to the event on May 15.
And May 15.
Mm-hmm.
And May 15, there is supposed to be a team of Rastafari vindicating for the rule of freeing ganja, because during the time in 1958 we have our rights as indigenous Rastafari people of that community to have this economic stardom that we can be economically independent. But as for now, I can see that the government is not really doing what they're supposed to do. They are sidestepping us.
Yes, let's talk about that, because, all right, so finish. So because of that situation as it exists right now, where Rastafari feels that and it is true, it's more than just a feeling. We see this as a reality, that Rastafari is being sidestepped by the powers that be. That's all involved in the decriminalization of marijuana on the island. The event on May 15 is going to be what?
Yes.
What's going to happen on May 15?
And May 15, we're all going to stand with our placard saying to the government, it's time to free. There should be no more. It's time to free our economy. There should be no more charge for this indigenous plan.
Okay.
And
yes. Go ahead, sis.
Go ahead. There should be no more charge, no more discrimination for this indigenous plant. That is the way of our life. That is how we survive. When you locked up the strength of the house, what happened to the female, or what happened to the empresses that is there? The amount of trauma, the amount of chaos that they cause on the family. When you lock up a Rastafari or locked up an indigenous person because of our plant, and that is the way we live. It is in the declaration from 1958 to 59. That's the way how I live. That's the way our economy goes. So the government. So
it's going to be
the government.
It's going to be a protest. So it's going to be a protest.
Not a protest.
It's not a protest.
It's a peaceful protest.
A peaceful protest.
Yes.
And so I'm looking at the notes that I have here. No more Rastafari, grassroots or adherents of Rastafari should be charged for our sacrament ganja. All for one and one for all. And where are you asking people to gather?
They shall gather down by the courthouse in Clarkstown, Falmouth. We're asking ones to come out, say their piece in a peaceful way.
At the courthouse?
At the courthouse.
And
we have a brother that is there that needs our strength. So, and this brother is a brother who decide to do a lot of economy in that area concerning freeing up of ganja, because a lot of persons earn. That's their living.
So there's a Rastafari brethren right now who is locked up.
No, he's not locked up. They charge him.
Oh, they charged him?
Yes.
Tell me about that. I don't know about that.
They charge this person who is he has never yet killed an ant. He's a peaceful person, spreading peace around the community and trying to help others to get their education, trying to help others in rebuilding themselves through Rastafari and through the House of Seba.
What was he charged for?
He was in charge of ganja.
Okay, and he's from the House of Seba?
He's from the House of Seba.
Oh, wow. And when did this happen?
Maybe about last week. Last week. I think it was the 29th.
Mm-hmm. But I thought that there was an agreement on paper and in effect where Rastafari is allowed the sacramental rights.
Yes, there's rights on paper. It is on paper, but we have no knowledge of why the government still trying to do this kind of atrocity to people. You understand?
So, Empress Lovai, we have Rastafari still being locked up for ganja here on the island in Jamaica. That's still being charged. Still being charged, at least.
Still being charged. Still being charged. And we want to speak to some of the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Security, and even the Minister of Gender, because based on what is going on, what is happening to the empresses when you take away the strength from the house, this is just causing chaos. What are the benefits when you charge a Rastafari man for ganja? What are the benefits of the government reap from that? Because there must be something they're reaping, or they're obeying something why they're still charging Rastafari. And that is their way from the declaration of 1958 and 1957 to 58. We have that declaration to work with. So why the government still not freeing up ganja?
And it's interesting because I think a lot of Jamaicans don't know this, and even not just Jamaicans, but globally people don't realize that with all the talk of decriminalization, with all the talk of sacramental rights, that Rastafari on the island are still being charged for possession of ganja, even though we hear that some deal was worked out regarding sacramental rights. So it apparently then a whole heap of holes in this sacramental right conversation between government and Rastafari. But that was always a problem from day one, and this is something that we were pointing out, Empress Lovai, that it was not sufficient. You would still be locking up Rastafari for ganja unless you'd looked at it from a broader or a better understanding of the importance of ganja to Rastafari's spirituality. So we don't. So this is still the problem. So as a result of that, the brethren are going to be gathering on May 15 outside of the which
Clarkstown. In Trelawney.
And this will be a peaceful protest.
A peaceful protest, because we want to have words with the government, especially the Justice Minister, the Minister of Security, and the Minister of Gender.
Right. And do you have you as a House of SEBA contacted any of these reps recently? I know that the Coral Gardens events happened. I know the Minister of National Security was there. He was literally gloating about making lands available.
I was there.
Right. So that was before the arrest.
I didn't hear my sister.
What was that before the arrest?
That was before the arrest, because I think that was in last month.
Yeah, what was the minister saying? Because did he speak to any of these issues, Rastafari still being locked up for, or still being charged for possession of ganja? Did he speak to any of that at all?
No, he didn't have nothing to say about that. What he was really saying, it was about land and getting titles for that piece of land up by Albion Mountain.
Yeah, so it was another photo opportunity, and him company television, and him, the microphones on him nose and so on and so forth. But the real issues are still not being dealt with.
No. So now is the time. We want to invite him on the 1st of August. That is a sacramental fest that is going to be at House of SEBA. So we want to invite the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Security, and also the Minister of Gender, to have words with him to see how best things can work out, because there has to be a way.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a desk at the Ministry of Culture, especially to deal with Rastafari affairs?
Yes, there is also a desk to deal with that purpose, but that is not dealing with, because they're dealing with culture. They're not dealing with indigenous rights. They kind of switch the word from indigenous to culture. And correct me if I'm right, because culture is supposed to be different. It's a different, complete.
Yes, it is how they understand culture. This is something that we talk a lot, as you know, about in this space. It's just how we have to redefine culture for deal with the issues that we're facing. But all right. So once again, just to underscore that we have a brother from the House of Seba who's been charged. I don't know what the charge is, but you're saying the charge is relating to ganja, right?
Yes. We'll not discuss how much and whatever, but he's been charged.
Right. And when is he expected to go back to court?
The 15th.
Okay, and so that's a day that Rastafari is being called to this space for a peaceful protest. What time?
10 o'clock.
All right. Well, my sister, listen, this is I suppose we use this as a catalyst to pressure the system, because obviously what is going on is ridiculous. Obviously. So let me know. Please keep in touch with me. Let me know how this unfolds.
Well, my sister, I'll keep in touch with you.
Yes.
And we'll continue to have.
Is there anything else you want to say quickly?
Yes. I'd like to say greetings to the House of Seba. Greetings to my community, I'm from Speartown, and maybe you recognize the face of the Rasta lady who was there, with the Empress who was there with you in Speartown.
Yes. I recognize the voice immediately.
Oh my God. So you see now,
yes,
this is the opportunity for all Rasta to come out and give the strength.
Yes.
Because unity is strength.
Of
so
course.
When you come out and give, you see, now, when you give that strength, it helps to curve. Don't sit at home and say, oh, it's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay.
Everybody's going to get them.
Yeah. We want to shine our light and shine it so bright. Because ganja has to be free. That's the economic of Rastafari independence.
It's a shame, isn't it, that here on the island, I know globally people wouldn't even recognize the extent to which Rastafari is still being persecuted and prosecuted for ganja. My sister, keep the fire blazing. We keep in touch with you. Thank you so much.
I will do that, my sister.
Right.
I will do that.
Give
Rastafari,
Give thanks.
Bless and guide.
Give thanks.
And protect you.
You too. All right, 8 minutes now, going up to 7 o'clock. Well, let me take this break.
Sunfresh beats dirt and grime every time. Grab yours at a supermarket or wholesale island-wide. The time by Sunfresh is...
Well, 8 minutes going up to 7 o'clock. It's an interesting thing because we've been having, and over the years, many conversations about how the powers that be, those who controlled the strings, who held the strings, were discussing, first of all, and then implementing the changes regarding the decriminalization of ganja on the island. But specifically, the issues relating to Rastafari. They narrowed this thing down to sacramental rights. It was wrong from day one. It was wrong. There was a sellout. There was a sellout of Rastafari at the very beginning. And we said that. But I know that, and I know I said this again, and I know that I'm going to come out of fire from the very same, some of the very same brethren who have said to me many times, you have no right to speak on Rastafari issues. But I have a right to a Pan-African opinion. And so here I am. We're still holding that we have to go back and correct the sellout if we're going to fix the problem, because there is a very serious problem regarding the treatment of Rastafari and the discussions around decriminalization, access. There are barriers to access. They made sure that only, and this is, listen, it's interesting because they're forced, as African people on the island, we are forced, our backs up, we're forced against a wall. And when they do that, and we point out that a fool back alone against the wall, and the out of one many backs not upon the wall, that they have a smooth pathway, open access to open all kinds of businesses around and relating to ganja. On this, point that out in their narcissistic and sociopathic ways. They tell you, they gaslight you into saying and thinking that you are being xenophobic. I'm going to put that out there because that has come to me many, many times. They try to put that tag on me. I reject that. When the victim and the oppressed bawl out, you can't and you have no right. Appearances to the mind are of four kinds. Things either are what they appear to be, or they neither are nor appear to be, or they are and do not appear to be, or they are not and yet appear to be. Rightly to aim in all these cases, in the words of Epictetus, is our task, a FUI task. Because they have gaslit Rastafari into acting off to start a medicinal or any kind of ganja outlet or anything to do with tourism. You're not good enough for that because we have carry tourists and so tourists are benefiting, tourists are coming in and they're going to all of these places. And Rastafari was the sellout, is a wicked sellout in what's happening in the DRC. Let's pay some serious attention to what's happening with Rwanda. There was a bomb that was dropped on the DRC, the DR Congo, in the eastern DR Congo displacement camps. At least 12 were killed in that bomb attack. The United States is blaming Rwanda. Well, we placed Rwanda in the midst of all of this long time. We know what Kagame is doing. We know exactly how he's doing it. We know why he's doing it. And we know why Britain has gone into partnership with Rwanda. We know why Dominica, the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Rwanda have developed this special relationship, even while children are being raped, babies are being murdered in the DRC by the M23 and others. The M23, of course. Anyway, I'll come back to that. Let me leave that for now. But the genocide that's underway in the DRC is no simple matter. One of the worst genocides in the world is underway right now in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Rwanda is up to their necks in that. The fight, the women and children, men too. But because they're using rape as a weapon of war against our babies, there are a lot of reports out there about this. Not enough coverage, not enough of us talking about it. But it is what it is. It's ongoing. Even while the Richie Sunak and them in Britain are intent on sending back so-called migrants seeking asylum to sending them to Rwanda, not even back. The first refugee went back, was sent back with £3,000 and 5 years of accommodation last week, just ahead of the local government elections, which Rishi Sunak was properly whipped anyway. but we'll talk about that another time. As I said, I have a lot on my mind, and I'm going to find a little space in the program this morning to talk about some of these things that are ongoing within our community. We have a right to a Pan-African opinion. All right, so inside of Child Month, it is Child Month here on the island. And as I said earlier, we've been carrying this theme since 1992. We have, over the years, maintained that, yes, if we understand the theme, then we'll begin to address some of the issues. What are we going to tell our children about their future? A lot of us can identify because our parents, our own parents, told us about our future. And what does tell mean in the sentence? Tell don't mean dictate. Tell don't mean this is what you're going to do and this is what it's going to look like. What tell means is our understanding of the past, the present, and the future, and how all of them connected. Right? Like Peter Tosh says, that man are there, that man are there, that man up on earth still. So this is the idea behind the theme. What are we going to tell our children about their future? So that's our general theme for the month once again. Thank you so much. I've seen your comments. Thank you so much. So we're going to go to the phone lines now to speak to my very special guest, Angela R. Morris. She's an author and a specialist business coach. She has worked in the health and social care sector for over 25 years, specializing in working with providers of children and adults in need of care and support. She holds a master's degree in applied psychology. Angela also holds diplomas in child development, life coaching, and financial advice. She is a proud mother of 3 sons and a dedicated grandmother, and she promotes personal freedom. Going to be talking to her this morning about her book, Don't Let Them Stop You. It's personal. I just love the topic. I just love the title of that book, believe me. She joins me on the phone lines live from the UK. Greetings, my sister. Welcome to the program.
Oh, good morning, Kabu. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm very excited to be on today.
As we are to have you, my sister. So I've read your book twice, and I know I sent you.
Oh, wow!
Yes, I sent you. And listen, I'm sure off a bit, because it's 2.5 times. Because I don't finish the 3rd time yet. But so I sent you a little text yesterday. I think it was Saturday, to say. This is going to take more than one sitting, So we're playing you by ear. This is a book that I'm putting on our book club reading list, the Running African Book Club. Don't Let Them Stop You. It's Personal by Angela Morris. Angela, you at the beginning of the book, you spent some time telling us about how you came to write this book. And I want to start there also to say what led you to write this masterpiece, because this is a brilliant, brilliant work.
Oh, thank you so much. I've always sort of dabbled with writing, in my spare time. When I say dabbled, I mean literally dabbled. I always felt there was an author inside me because I love to read. I've been reading since I was very, very young. Mm-hmm. But I came to a point, it was, as I've said in the book, it was my 60th birthday. I was like, okay, what can you give yourself as a present? And literally, it was like, write the book you always said you would write, but now I'm coming from a different place, having lived a lot longer. I wanted something for my generation to come, actually, like my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren to come, whoever they may be. So it was really important that me as a black woman, that they could say, oh, your great-grandmother wrote a book, and to encourage them,
yes.
When they see that it's in print. Mm-hmm. So that was a great motivator for me, but I felt that the time was right. And if I said, let me for my 60th birthday, I had to make sure I got it done before I became 61, which I did.
Well, thank you for doing this. And I'm sure you must have been told this many, many times, is that what you did was to say out loud, to put into print and publish what a lot of us are struggling with, questions that are in our minds when, we're in our quiet moments or otherwise, and even the confusion that so many of us in our community go through, is that you've put that down and you've said, all right, even for my own experiences, but also for my training as a psychologist and as a life coach and a child development specialist, that these are some of the practical solutions, if you will. Even though what you've done through the book, and I like this, is that you've left it open for the reader to engage with the text. So let me go there for a minute to talk about the style, the format in which the book is presented, in that the reader becomes part of the story.
Yes.
Explain to us why you did that and what that includes.
Because it's personal. The part that the title is "Don't Let Them Stop You." It's personal, and it's personal to you, the reader. Everybody has their own story. So what I say is, like, you could be in a family of 10 children, 5 children, and every child will interpret their life story very differently. So as we get older and we start to mature, just because one of your siblings, it didn't go like that, and you're like, no, it did, because we all have our own interpretation of our own experience, don't we, and perceptions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people want to kind of minimize other people's experiences, but I want this book to be personal, so no one is allowed to come in and minimize your experience, your life experience.
I really like that, because this is exactly what you were saying. So being engaged in the way that you engage the reader, because there are even places in the book where you say, okay, here is where you can make your own notes. So what do you think about, I think in every chapter there's a space there for people to reflect. And so let's go right there. Reflection. How important is reflection throughout this book?
I think it's very important. Sometimes what you find in, having in my work, people go, you need to forget about the past, just leave it there, forget about it. But actually, I think you need to sometimes reflect on your experience to understand why you are the way you are. Why are you here in this present place? Mm-hmm. And also, the power of reflection is you can stop and look and you can make changes. Because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results over and over again. Mm-hmm. But if you're able to stop and think, maybe I got it wrong. And reflecting is not always about, I'm going to turn and point the finger and blame people for their behaviour. Also look at yourself and go, and what changes can I make to empower myself to go forward? Mm-hmm.
So, don't let them stop you. Who's them? Who them?
Wow, wow. Well, this is why in the book, Kabu, I go through and I break down all these different relationships because I don't know who they are, but you know who they are.
So, them is this, like I have a friend who wrote a poem, when I saw the topic, I said, I think she's going to go in a similar direction that my friend, who is a poet, wrote, an entire poem about them. Who them? They are the same one who, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you went through the different relationships, and I want to start there because you started with the children, the parents, right? The mother, the relationship with the mother. You're saying this is very important to the personalities that we form, our behaviors, but we might not be aware of that. Explain that.
Yeah, the thing is, a mother's, a mother's got a tough job, but it's a job that they have opted for because at the end of the day, You know, if you don't want to be a mother, you can always give your children away. You know, you can have them fostered, adopted, but you take on the role, right? So, but I think that when I go in the book and I say as that you can reflect on your mother's experiences. So what mothers don't understand is how powerful they are and how powerful that bond is. Mm-hmm. Like, I've worked in health and social care for many years. You know, children constantly running away from children's homes, going back to the mother that the state have declared to be unfit. You know, they might beat them, kick them, whip them, cuss them, tell them all kinds of things about themselves and be nasty. But the bond is so strong because every individual wants to be loved by their mother. Mm-hmm. So when you realise how powerful you are, you can afford to be kind and generous, but you cannot be kind and generous if your lived experience shows that, you know, oh, you need to be a harsh parent. But I'm not being funny. You're the mother. Everybody knows you're the boss. Mm-hmm. There's nothing else to prove. We all know you're in charge. So you don't have to become, you know, a bully to prove that you're a mother. Just by being a mother, we know that you're the boss.
Mm-hmm. And the point you raise in the book is the extent, because you look at the mother, you also look at the father, and as you said earlier, the different relationships. Before I go on, because we're going to do this in segments, I know we're not able to, in terms of time, to go through all of the book, but you're going to come back and we continue. But just so our listeners know, the different areas that you look at in the book, as far as relationships are concerned. So there's a mother, there's a father, the family dynamics. Who else?
Yeah. Well, within outside of that, then we're looking at friends, a big chapter around friends, your significant other, spiritual leaders. Yes, I kind of go there in terms of people being able to look at the people who influence you. Mm-hmm. So this book really is about who's influencing you, mm-hmm. and how are you being influenced? Mm-hmm. Can you get out of it if you feel trapped? Yes, you can. Is the solution? Is the answer? Mm-hmm. But you need to do a bit of work. You know, Kabu, I think people do buy my book, and a lot of them, I think after chapter 1 and 2, they put the book down. And I always say you need courage because, you know, to kind of explore those deeper areas of your life in order to make progress, it can be a bit painful.
Right, because what it does, it allows you to face yourself, and this is why I spoke about reflection earlier, because it really does that. Even for myself, and the first time, you know, I was like, yeah, it does, and then being aware of that and reading it the second time, to be more truthful and honest with yourself, it also it guides you there, but it really doesn't force you so much as it guides you to face your own self. But I like the point you made just now that the people who influence you in your life can have a serious impact on who you become and what you do. And this is what you're trying, what you've done through the book is to point out how these different people, you know, the kind of impact they can have. So the family dynamics and how, and you talk about this, how we can impact it and influenced by family, even if not blood family. So you spoke about the mother, then also there is the father and the sibling dynamics. You say these are really very, very important.
Oh, yes. Because, again, siblings, we kind of underestimate our influence over our brothers and sisters. And also, I think the way that the parents can machinate the structure. Mm-hmm. So the eldest is always heard, always respected as a sibling. You know, siblings being intrusive, a bit, you know, bullyish in terms of feeling that their opinion even overrides your opinion. But as we all go into adulthood, those dynamics should change. But what you find is a lot of times they're still living like that, like deferring to their siblings, be they the older one, be they the smart one or the clever one or whatever. And so, you know, for me, when I wrote the book, I was envisioning, well, lots of different dynamic relationships, but envisioning people going, oh, you know, but my brother said, and he's always right, and my sister. No one is always right. Nobody. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not living your life. you're living your life. Hopefully.
One of the things that I like that you did in the book is a talk about enmeshment. And can you spend some time talking about that for us? Explaining what that is and how that is presented in the sibling dynamics or the family dynamics, if you will.
Yeah, so enmeshment is something that I learned about when I was studying my, psychology masters, and it was a bit shocking, actually, when I was like, you go, oh my goodness, I see this, I've probably experienced it as well, and really, when enmeshment is really about a whole family dynamic where everybody is expected to move as one. And when I say move as one, it's like, I'm trying to think of an example, like having an opinion, everybody needs to share that opinion, everybody needs to agree with each other. And if they don't agree, if you don't agree, you become an outcast within your own family. But it's such a subtle, enmeshment is so subtle that you don't realise it's happening. And sometimes it's all done with the best of intentions. But so, for example, you can be very overprotective. Let's call Sarah Jane. Sarah Jane, she can't manage, this. And everybody rushes around Sarah Jane and treats her like she cannot manage. But sometimes it can be born from, trauma. It's a very in-depth subject, but it can be born from some kind of trauma. But it has a significant negative effect when you don't allow that family member to spread their wings and make their own decisions and go off and do what they want to do, because everybody almost encircles them, like wraps them up in their opinions, like, no, that's not what we do as a family, that, or we don't do that. Well, actually, no, yes, we do. I do.
But you point out that this is a dysfunctional situation, though, that this is, regardless of the intention, that this is dysfunctional.
Yes, but it doesn't appear dysfunctional on the surface.
All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running Africa, and my very special guest on the phone lines live from the UK is Angela Morris. She's an author of the book, Don't Let Them Stop You, It's Personal. She's a specialist business coach, also holds a master's degree in applied psychology. Angela, we were talking about, as we went into the break, the dysfunctional family that is enmeshed, and you're explaining to us what that is. Help us to understand then, how can this situation, the extent to which this situation can impact your growth? Because stop you in this means, from just reading through the book, obviously it means growth and development and so on.
Yeah. So how does it stop you? If you're a person that is, would appear to be naturally indecisive. So, for example, you feel like you can't make a move or a turn without having to consult your family's opinion. That's actually not a good sign. Mm-hmm. But it can be disguised as, I know my family care for me and love me, so their opinion is important to me. But actually, are you losing then your sense of identity and autonomy? Is everything done in the light of your family? Mm-hmm. So what happens is there's no kind of boundaries, and then the family themselves sometimes need to turn around and go, don't ask me, go and sort yourself, you make a decision. Mm-hmm. But where it becomes something that's unhealthy is, you did that and you didn't tell us. Mm-hmm. No, I don't have to tell you everything I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But when that environment, it's cultured under the guise of, we are looking after you, we are looking out for you, but actually what you're doing is you're smothering and you're stopping each individual's maturity and growth.
Does this also go back to the point you made earlier, talking about parenting, and you wrote about this in the book, the significant impact that parenting styles can have on a child's development? What is the extent of that impact on whether or not the family then later becomes this enmeshed, dysfunctional family we're talking about?
Yeah, so when I did my master's, I actually wrote my dissertation on Afro-Caribbean parenting, first and second generation. Mm-hmm. So, which I came back. I got a merit for it, which I was very proud of, but they said it's an under-researched subject.
Yes.
So one of the things, as I said, and I think there's a bigger piece here. I think for black people, there's a whole slavery legacy thing there. And so in terms of that whole thing, under the guise of like protection. So I think there's a mixture of Victorian values. Children should be seen and not heard, and that's gone on for generations. Punishments that are harsh punishments, which actually serve absolutely no purpose whatsoever. Mm-hmm. We now know. So there's a cultivation almost of fear. That I think that's the underlying fear of people being independent, and a fear, but is it a healthy fear of everybody? Normally, as I always put in the book, normally parents want their children to do well, but the fear that is driving that wanting them to do well is causing other complex issues. Mm-hmm. And when you don't have a level of kind of understanding of what your parenting style is doing, because you could also have parents that are very liberal and they go the wrong way. Like anything goes. Well, anything doesn't go because life doesn't work like that. Mm-hmm. When you raise children with anything goes, they're likely to end up in prison or something, because it's not that's not how life works. So,
if you take a moment, Angela, and I know, we'll just have these conversations every Sunday until we finish, but because I think it's that important. But if you take a moment, to talk us through because you've listed, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 main parenting styles, which resonated with me. In other words, I recognize them. So, talk to us about the different parenting styles, and how, understanding this, and I can, not so much understanding, but the significant impact that this can have on the child's development.
Right. Okay. So, the parenting style thing, I think, is so you've got your authoritarian style, strict rules, high demands, and I think and punishment basically used to maintain discipline and control. Mm-hmm. So the challenges around that is if and listen, I'm of Jamaican origin, so we've brought up most of us are brought up in that under that style, right? Mm-hmm. Where do as I say, not as I don't answer me back. Who do you think you're talking to? Mm-hmm. All of that. But what parents may be not understanding is what that does to the child's self-esteem, and then they don't know how to talk to people, and they are fearful. And I'm not saying everybody, because I was brought up under authoritarian style, and here I am talking to you. But I've gone on my journey, and that's the difference. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you've got the authoritative, warm, can be nice. You understand that you're in authority, but you can be nice. You can, set your boundaries, but you don't have to be aggressive and harsh. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the permissive ones. We would say when you spoil them, as we say, if you let them do what they like, and it's really interesting because what we're finding, I don't know about Jamaica, but certainly in the West, with some of our black parents, is they kind of have this, don't bother me. It's like, that's okay, you can do it, that's okay. And they don't make any demands on the child to comply, but they're kind of also fussing around them, but they're not really bringing that balanced picture. And then the last one is uninvolved, which basically is neglect. Like, don't bother me. I'm not interested. Do what you want to do. And also trying to treat them as an adult before their time, because that's what you do with adults. You go, I don't need to hear from you, but a child does need your input. So, you can... And sometimes you get a blend of all four.
Right, because you did point that out. So if is there an ideal one, or what?
Well, authority, if there is an ideal, if we were going to have a gold standard, you would take the authoritative, which is understanding that you are the boss, for want of a better expression. Yes, you are the boss, you're the head honcho, but with that sense of understanding your role, you can afford to be generous, you can afford to, but still set boundaries, but you allow that child to grow and start making some decisions for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Start to set some boundaries.
In the book, you talk about healing and understanding who we are based on the past, the formative years, to get in touch with that and then to face the truths of ourselves, especially our relationships with our parents. How important is that to not allow ourselves to be stopped?
Well, okay. When I've worked in, when I've worked on the front line in the care industry and working with, young people that were in care, and I talk about mothers, I found those who really struggled with their mental health. It's kind of interesting. Those who struggled with their mental health had problems with their mothers in particular, and even adults, actually. So forget even the kids, even adults who struggle with their mental health. I was talking to a guy just the other day who has problems with his mental health, alcohol, and I just said to him, look, okay, what would you tell me? He started to talk about his mother, and this guy's in his 40s, and he started to talk about his mother, and it was very moving, but he said, my mum didn't care about me. So, and she just kind of left me to kind of grow myself, right? And this is an Indigenous person. So, yes. So it's how important is it? It's very, very important. I think, again, we all have different levels of resilience, Kabu. So some people can be like, she was who she was. It doesn't impact me. I'm going to be a different person. But that still comes from understanding that she was who she was. Although it might be into a bit of bitterness. But in terms of, so to the nth degree, it could really impact your mental health when you don't seek that space to, if you need it, be healed from perhaps an unhealthy relationship with your mother.
Don't let them stop you. It's personal. And the author of the book, really try and get this book. I know it is online. And when we come back, Angela will tell us where you can get that. But we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with much more inside of the Africa Forum. Hold for me, please.
Fairs. Claim no easy victory.
Back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running Africa and my very special guest, Angela Morris. Don't let them stop you. It's personal. Angela, I want to go to one of, to me, a very important chapter. All the chapters are really important, but one of the chapters that really centered me when I was reading is a chapter on friendships and friends and so on. I want to go there. But before I do that, I'm deliberately going forward to the beginning of the book, the early pages of the book, where you talked extensively about setting boundaries, the importance of setting boundaries, the importance of understanding who you are. You talk about people's expectations and the choices that an individual has. So, help us now to understand, how do you get to that point of, setting boundaries, and how important is it to do so?
Yeah, well, what I will say is, how do you get there? If you're not, raised in an environment where you have been allowed to set your own boundaries, it takes practice. Because it takes practice. Because, if your culture doesn't lend you to do that, where does one begin? So I think, the importance, it takes practice. And, I do talk about it extensively in the book. Because I think it's really, because the reason I talk about it extensively in the book is because a lot of times the problems people are in and the what they're feeling kind of emotionally, senses of feeling a bit powerless, really it's only because they might think, I'm really struggling with this, but actually the part of the problem 9 times out of 10 is that you haven't set any boundaries and you're scared to set boundaries. And what is boundaries? 9 times out of 10 includes the word saying no, or I don't want to do that. and when you see, taking it back to, you know, certainly for our, you know, culture and demographic, that's something that you don't do. You don't tell your parents, I'm not doing that.
I was just going to go there, that our culture, and a lot of cultures, like, you know, the African culture, I think, if you look at Chinese and Indian and Turkish and so, you don't say no to your parents. You hardly say no to your family and so on. But you're saying it's really important to understand boundaries and to set them. So when you talk about boundaries, you're saying it's even to that point where you are not afraid to say no.
Yeah. And if it's not in your natural bent, that's why I say it takes practice.
Yes.
You know, because, and sometimes you have to start, I think, you know, you can start saying no to little things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, I don't want to eat that. Thank you. You know, but, go on, eat it. No, actually, I don't eat that. You know, and so you start off with this, like anything. I'm not going to say you go in and you start telling people, no, I'm stuck.
Yes.
Carrying on.
Right.
And what's wrong with you?
Where do you draw the line culturally between being rude and just setting boundaries? Take, for example, you know, when you go on the continent of Africa, you walk in a home, you're going to be offered food, and sometimes it is fufu, sometimes it is something that is pounded, and you watch it pounded and so on. And you really don't, but to refuse is to upset, and we take that now to our own homes. You walk into a home and you're offered something. You don't want to eat that, you don't want to drink that, but if you don't, and this happens in many cultures, and I know I'm taking it to the extreme, but you if you refuse, then you're being you're upsetting somebody.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you know what, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
What's
because
okay?
You cannot. It's okay if they're upset. And that's all part of setting boundaries. No, to understand, it's okay. Like, they're going to be upset, and what? They're not going to kill you, are they? They're not going to cast you into outer darkness. They're going to be upset for a minute.
Yes.
Yeah? So part of it is understanding not just yourself, but other people. Mm-hmm. So they're offended. What's the worst thing that can happen? Yeah. So they'll banish you from there. You'll never be... If you cannot respect my decision making, then I don't really want to be in your circle either.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense, because we're not going to get on. Because one of the things that needs to happen is that I need to be free to have my voice. And if I go, you think, I ate that thing. Look, we'll take food because it's easy, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So there's certain things that I cannot and will not eat. So, for example, I don't like okra on any level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how you're serving it. I'm not eating it. I don't care if you're going to offer me £1 million. I'm not eating it.
That makes sense.
So if you're going to bring that to me and I'm going to say, sorry, I don't eat that, and you might be annoyed, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So getting annoyed is not going to kill anybody, is it?
Yeah, and that is at a micro level, Angela. And I hear you saying, but we have to practice setting boundaries. Yes. So this happens over time, and that is important. Why? Because
if you don't practice it, if you don't start at some point to practice, what you'll find is people will, I call it, literally trample through your life. So it doesn't have to be, so it doesn't have to be family. It could be friends. You know, sometimes you just have to say, if you are busy, say you are busy. You can't be sitting there entertaining people all day when you've got things to do, if you have things to do. If you want to do it, it's fine. But if you don't, they can feel like, just turn up randomly, unexpected, and you're going to drop everything. But when you set boundaries, they will know, I need to check in, I need to set a time with this one. Mm-hmm. I can't just randomly turn up, because she's going to let me know, okay, in future, really appreciate you coming. Great that you stopped by, but, I have quite a busy schedule. So, and even if you haven't, but just say, I'd really appreciate it. Can we set a time next time just to make sure we can have some good quality time? Mm-hmm. And that's a way of setting a boundary. It's not aggressive. Mm-hmm. It's just setting out the stall. And people might be, again, the reason why people worry, because they think, oh, but if I say that, they're going to be upset. No, they're not. They're going to just respect you.
You've also put this in perspective, right? Because you talk about what you've armed the reader with information regarding differentiating between the different types of information, also, so that even when you're setting boundaries, understanding what information is personal, what is private, what is confidential, what is secret information, and so on, and making a commitment to yourself, so that don't let them stop you. It's also about self-preservation, maintaining your own peace of mind and for your own health, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're, as individuals, we are all entitled to do that. And I think that's why I wrote the book. I really wanted to empower people, and that's why I kind of break it down and go, because the thing is, when you're sharing information, or sometimes you don't really know who you're talking to, because we don't. And okay, so taking it back, if you're a person who doesn't know how to set boundaries, you'll put your whole life out there to people, and that can be very dangerous in the long run, because you don't know how to hold something back for yourself. So in terms of empowering, I wanted people to feel empowered and make that commitment to them, not to anybody else. Commit to you, because once you start committing to you, that's one of the best days of your life.
And sometimes in setting boundaries, there situations may arise where you feel that you need to share information to say, so this is why I am doing this. You're cautioning in the book against the type of information that you share, even in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, you need to think. You need to take a moment, and, we're in this time now, sometimes you're kind of rushing, you're not thinking. Sometimes you need to stop for a moment, and that's the reflection piece where I go, like, stop for a second, right? Think about what you're sharing and why are you sharing it. And it's it's okay to do that. Just because somebody asks me a question, I don't have to answer you that question. Because what are you doing? And I need to think about, if I give you this information, what might you be doing with it? Or because and that comes, and it's still about, it's another piece around building healthy relationships. But what happens is sometimes you meet people in 5 minutes, they've told you their whole life story. But what they've done, not realizing it, you don't know who you're talking to. That person can take that information and start exploiting it, because you've already told them your weaknesses in 5 minutes of meeting them. And most people, yes, will be kind and generous, but there are some who are not nice, and they'll be like, and they won't come straight away. They'll come back round later, because they've worked out who you are, because you told them quickly who you were.
All right, we're taking another break, a quick break, and then to spend some time looking at friendships, because I like that you have gone through the categories of friends, how you navigate friendships, and what. And I want you to explain to us from your own writings and your own research and so on, what does a healthy friendship look like? So there's a whole lot there in that chapter on friends, but there's also a whole lot on the relationship, the male-female relationship, which I think you're going to have to come back for that one. That's a whole thing by itself. So we want to go. Listen, I'm definitely. So let us book it for. Well, listen, but let me take a break. I come back. Tunisia introduced me to Angela and introduced me to the book, and I'm very happy she did that, because this, I think, all of us should read. We should read it as parents. We should read it with our children. We should read it as friends. We should read it as partners, whoever we are, and then just as individuals, because it really gives you a moment of reflection to just stop and even if you think you're all right, just read it and then stop and say, let me see how that fit this and now, because it makes sense, and this is the point I'm making. It makes sense. All right. So, friendships. You spend a good time in the book, Angela, talking about friendships and looking at the categories of friends. So talk us through that, the categories of friends first, and then, let's start with the categories of friends.
Okay, so really, I mean, again, I'm kind of broad brushing these. When I write, I'm broad brushing.
Yes.
So I could really kind of go into that. But basically, you're looking at your best friends. You've got your besties, as they call them, these young people, your close friends, your casual friends, and then your frenemies.
Yeah, so, I noted that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, one of the things, I put a social media post out. I've started doing TikTok, actually, which has been the most amazing fun. My granddaughter helped me set up the account. And I put a post out and saying, basically, are you ready to promote, demote, or remove friends?
Oops.
Based on the juncture you are in your life. Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes some friends, they need to be promoted. They've earned that privilege. Mm-hmm. Some of them you need to demote because they're not being as perhaps as helpful or contributing to your life. Mm-hmm. And some you just need to remove. They're not really true friends. Mm-hmm. So I think friends are powerful, probably, and sometimes as you get older, probably more powerful than family. Certainly in the teenage years, puberty, it's all about friends, isn't it?
Yes, yes. So what is a healthy friendship? Because you talk about toxic friendships, and then the healthy friendship. What does a healthy friendship look like?
Yeah, I think the healthy friendship is that, when you're in their presence, they make you feel comfortable. They are supportive. They make you laugh. They're good listeners. And most importantly, they don't judge your decision making.
Mm-hmm.
How they make you feel when they're when you're in their presence is also important. Because some people have friends, but are they really friends? Because you almost feel like you have to be in your best behaviour when you're with them. That's not really what friends are about. Friends are you can just be yourself without fear of judgment.
Mm-hmm. And the flip side of that is what?
I think the flip side of that is that you can end up in you call it a friendship, but really it's a control situation. Mm-hmm. So again, it's like they're constantly wanting to dictate your life, or they're insensitive to your needs and your situation. It's all about them, and you're kind of there to feed them and their egos, but they're not really. When the tables are reversed, they're not what I call clapping for you. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. They're not there to support you. They're minimizing your stuff. Mm-hmm. Oh, so you've got that. Oh, so you're going on a radio station, IRFM. Well, I'm going on BBC World, whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So in terms of, I think friendships are circles. I think as you get older, though, your friendships get smaller. Your circle definitely gets smaller. When you're young, you think you've got a million friends. But those friends are, I think, again, young people, they use terms like ride or die, which means faithful to the end. I think even that to get a bit carried away. But I feel like a good, healthy friendship is one where you're able to express yourself. They might make you think, have you thought about this? But they're not going to be like, oh, well, if you don't do it my way, or they're constantly shoving their opinions on you. And if you don't follow them, they're going to be off-key and upset, and you don't hear from them and sulking and, So those are the sort of things I'm saying.
One of the things that
some might say, well, that's all part.
Yeah, but one of the things that you do in the book, and I know we're going to talk about it when you come back, because this you deal with when you're talking about the male-female relationships, is you mention narcissistic relationships. But you do also have that in the friendship situation, isn't it? As you talk about control and the going off and the silent treatment and so on. How does and you've done a good job with that in the male-female, but doesn't that go also for, and isn't it the same thing for friendships between women, friendships between men, women?
No, 100%. As I said, I touch on it in terms of when I talk about, like, you know, people, you know, using you for their emotional use. Like, it's all about me. It's all about me. It's what I'm doing. You must listen to me and my stories. But I haven't got time to listen to your stories and your stuff. So, yes. And so, you know, those the challenge, and it does get complicated. I feel like this is a bit of a rabbit hole. How do you have to then try and get yourself out of those relationships without feeling devalued as a result? Because if you're that person, and it's okay to be champions for people, and you're their, you know, you're their champion, or this person's so wonderful, and you're so great, you're so this, then you attach, you know, you can end up attaching value to the fact that you're their champion. So how do you walk away and not feel less of a person because you're not their champion, their cause anymore, and actually know that when you walk away, they go, okay, good, on with the next one. They're not even looking back. That's hard.
Yeah, so it is important.
It is hard, but it can be done.
And as you point out, there are ways to manage friendships, because this is also a subtitle in the chapter. Talk us through that briefly. Managing friendships.
Yeah. Well, you know, again, I think in terms of when you, I think the key is to remember in life that with your life, you do have to manage everything that's going on in your life. If you leave things for people to do for you, or you're losing, you end up losing control, and then you start falling into depression. So, what you need to do, you need to evaluate. The way you manage it is you evaluate your friendship circle, understanding, and where do I fit in the circle? Yeah. Where am I? And again, bit of reflection, right? Knowing when a relationship has come to the end of its time, and that can be very difficult because it feels like a loss. It feels like a bereavement. You know, letting things fade out. Like, if you're not hearing from them, stop chasing them, and that's how you manage it, by you taking some action. Stop ringing people that are not calling you back. They're telling you, and then you become more and more anxious because they're not picking up the phone. Actually, they gave you a message by not picking up the phone. They told you, you know, and it can be very difficult.
But is it not straightforward though? Because I don't want my friends to stop calling me. Listen now, if me not picking up the phone, no, please call me back. Angela.
No, but you know what I mean? But no, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like, if for example, like, if any of my friends call me, if I can't speak to them because I'm busy, I'll always say, I'll call you back. Or, you know, I'll always send a message. But I'm talking about this relentless pursuit. Because you have this fear of being abandoned. So, does that make sense? So you're frightened of all, you know, and also because you've given them so much information about your life, you feel like you can't even let the relationship go because you've told them so much about you. You're like, why? I better not get out. Do you know what I mean? So where is it coming from? Is it a fear of being abandoned? Because the reality is we are never truly alone. And as I said, there's 8 billion people on planet Earth. If that friend is not valuing you, go and get another one. There are a whole lot of people out there.
And you say friendships die. Friendships do die. And sometimes they're on life support, but sometimes you really do have to come to that realization and let go. What role would does reflection play though, or what's the importance of reflection together, or reflexivity, if you will, together, as friends? Do you do this together and by yourself, just to keep looking back at even your own role in the friendship and how you yourself might be impacting others within that friendship?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not talking about navel gazing, so I'm not saying, you know, you just sit there all day reflecting.
Yes.
You drive yourself mad. No, what I'm saying is you go back and you go, okay, so was there, if it's gone a bit shaky or it's dead, is there something, what was my role, if any? Sometimes you enable the situation, you keep dragging the thing on. when the person is basically trying to pull away from you, but we don't want to see something what we want. So reflection is, it can be for a moment, it can be for, a few moments, even an hour or two, but I'm not talking about every day you wake up and you're going, oh, what did I do wrong? No, that's not reflection. And I have a whole chapter on that in the book.
Yes, you do. And then
about how to self-reflect.
And I think it's really important, especially when you're dealing with narcissism, that you begin to second guess yourself. What did I do wrong? Because you're being devalued. So, all right, we're definitely going to be talking about that next time. I know that a lot of people are disappointed that we're not covering that whole chapter today, but because it is such a large, chapter by itself, but also because the information, it needs more than just 15 minutes. It needs more than a few segments. So we're going to do it in our next chat with you, Angela, looking at the relationship, the male-female relationship and everything that comes with that.
Yeah. Now, what will help the viewers is to get, if they get, those of you who can get your hands on a copy of the book, do so, because that will help. Also, when we're going through the chapter, we can unpick some stuff and might help bring clarity.
Of course. And let's look at trust quickly, because one of the things you underscore also in friendships is this idea of trust and how important that is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like any relationship on any level is built on trust. And trust, once broken, is very difficult to rebuild. And you know what? I think a lot of times we don't tap into our gut feelings as to whether somebody is trustworthy or not. But how do you know? You share something confidential and it's coming out from a source that you know you didn't send it to, but you know you only told one person. So that trust then is gone. And, some people go, oh, I'm never going to have friends again. No, you learn. So again, your trust measures, don't overshare too much too quickly. If nobody takes anything away, take that away. Don't be too fast to, as they used to say in Jamaica, tell out your whole belly. Don't do that. In one sitting.
Yep.
Yeah? Trust needs to be tested as well.
I want, before you go, I know we're out of time, and I want, before you go quickly, because we're not finishing our conversation this morning, but to kind of put a cap on this to say, for those who've listened, what is the one takeaway or three that you'd want our listeners to move away with this morning regarding what we have discussed so far?
Yeah, what I want the listeners to know and understand is you can take control of your life. You can walk in a way that you feel empowered. It takes courage, but it can be done, and you can be the driver of your own ship.
Thank you so much, my sister Angela Morris. The book is called Don't Let Them Stop You. It's personal. Where is it available?
It's available for those outside the UK, it's Amazon.com. Those inside the UK, Amazon.co.uk. But if you type the book in title, there's loads of it's on Waterstones, and you can get hard copies. You can get it on Kindle, download immediately, hard copies. So if you type the title in Google, there's a whole raft of distributors, but the main distributor is Amazon. Amazon.com.
All right. And so we're going to work out with you when you come back and we continue the conversation. Yeah. I really want to talk about the male-female relations, and I want to look at... Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true. So I have notes from our listeners already who are saying that somebody already checked the book on Amazon, and there are others who are out and ready to buy. So we're glad for that. Continue reading. Please get it, read, and then when we come forward next week, you can send in your questions also. If not next week, then definitely the week after. Simple for all of us to be able to read it. What it did for me is really, she talks about reflection in the book, but that's exactly what it does, It allows you to look again at yourself, look at your relationships, look at, and all of them, your friends, your parents, your siblings, your spouse, and to do that in a positive way, not a negative way, in a positive way, to say, where are we? How are we, and what are we? Those kinds of questions arise. But also it empowers you to be, to be yourself and to be more. I really like it. For me, it's an exclamation point. So we're adding it to the Running African Book Club, right? The book club for reading. Don't let them stop you. It's personal. This we're now adding to our book club reading list. Get your copy and let us read and then talk about it. And then because it is so easy to read and also there's some exercises in it for you, like a kind of diary situation, like a journaling where the spaces are provided for you to make notes, to say, how do I feel about that? What did I think about that? Blah, blah, stuff like that. Really good. I like it. I really do. Thank you, Angela, for that. My sister Isis Miller, she says, great book, looking forward to getting a copy and listening to next week. Don't let them stop you. It's personal relationships, narcissism. Isis must say, Isis, are you my sister? Yes, so I know. Isis and myself, we've had some serious conversations about narcissism, because once you are made aware of narcissism, once you recognize narcissism, you cannot unsee it. In other words, you can just go through life not realizing what this insidiousness is. And then once you begin to recognize it for what it is, child, wherever it presents itself, you recognize it immediately. So I want to have that conversation with Angela when she comes. K. my brother, he says, Grand Rising Kabu, I'm putting that book on my list. It sounds motivating. It really does. Arlene, my sister, says, greetings, Sister Queen. I'm sending some info for you to look at after the show. Please pass them on. I will most certainly do. Thank you so much, my sister. All right. And then that is just in one space. I'm trying to go to. And Stephen Rivera says, responding to Elton, he says, I attended the 2022 Coral Gardens commemoration, Pitford Nyabingi Center. National Security Minister Dr. Harris Chang was a guest speaker. When it was question and answer time, I asked why big companies with dollars had been given the first cannabis licenses, and while grassroots farmers and Rastafari had been put on the back burner. He was uncomfortable and began to talk about correspondent banking. I cut him short. That is a different issue, and repeated my question. He fiddled with his phone, did not answer my question, and his handler said, okay, thank you. That's it for questions. No surprise to me. Nzinga King had her locks butchered by agents of a state and then scapegoated as the aggressor. Rastafari is only useful as a tool to mythologize and romanticize Jamaica in the eyes of the foreigner. These are the brutal truths. So Kimani Nehusi will be joining me on the phone lines, and I know that you're excited to hear from Dr. Nehusi. He is a progressive African historian born in Guyana. He lectures at Temple University, and he's known for his work in linguistics and ancient Egyptian, Kemetian linguistic dispersal. He has a study remit in African and Caribbean history and society, Nile Valley societies, research methodologies, education and socialization, African and Caribbean languages. I think the BBC had it. Sky News definitely had it. It was also on some of the other local news. So they reported that the IMF, and we saw this report also out of the IMF saying that in its latest World Economic Outlook, that Russia is expected to grow 3.2% in 2024. Vladimir Putin also made that announcement, 3.2% growth, exceeding the forecast growth rates for the world's advanced economies. So Russia has exceeded the growth rate for the world's advanced economies in the middle of them trying to tell us that Russia is on its knees. So, for example, the US, the forecast growth rate is 2.7, the UK is 0.5, Germany 0.2, and France is 0.7, whereas Russia, it's a 3.2. A lot happening in Russia, by the way. We understand a lot of the young people who had left are returning, and there's the economy is booming. This is what we're understanding. But then when you think of the military industrial complex, it makes sense.
Mistakes, failures, claim no easy victory.
All right, we're back with you inside of the Africa Forum. This is Running African. Going to going to the phone lines now to join my very, very special guest online, Dr. Kimani Nehushi. A little bit about Dr. Kimani. Dr. Kimani Nehushi is a progressive African historian born in Guyana. He's an athlete, an academic who has lectured at the University of Guyana, the University of London, and the University of East London. He's known for his work on linguistics and ancient Egyptian Kemetian linguistics dispersal, and has a study remit in African and Caribbean history and society, Nile Valley societies, research methodologies, education and socialization, African and Caribbean languages. His written works include From Medunetta to Ebonics, Ethnic Minority, validity of the term paper, Language in the Construction of African Unity, Past, Present, and Policy in Mamamuchi, The Making of Africanation, Africanism and the African Renaissance, Who is an African? African Renaissance, Volume 1, Number 2, September to October 2004, Libation, an African ritual of heritage in the circle of life. Dr. Nehushi is joining me on the phone lines live from the United States. We're very honored to have him online. Dr. Nehushi, good morning. Greetings to you. Thank you so much for joining us on the Africa Forum this morning.
A very good morning to you, my good sister. Greetings, and greetings to all our listeners also.
Right. This is such a pleasure for us because we have, from time to time, well, very often actually, referenced your work in this space. And here we are having this conversation with you this morning. I know we're going to be talking broadly about your scholarship, but and in particular, your work on libation and the book Libation, an African Ritual of Heritage in the Circle of Life. But I want to start with rituals, if you don't mind, Dr. Nehushi, and the importance of rituals in African societies and African heritage. How important are rituals?
Well, I would say extremely important, because rituals are the most obvious ways of keeping our traditions and keeping them alive. There are two things, at least, immediately about rituals. One is that they are supposed to be as unchanging as possible, so that they are connected to our ancestors in ways that do not change. We remain ourselves through space and time. The other thing about a ritual, it's word, that it's thought, it's word, and it's an action or a series of actions. And again, this is a formula that tells us that, hey, this thing is important, and we must do it like this all the time or whenever it's prescribed. So rituals are tremendously important. They're one of the most obvious ways of telling us who we are, that we are African people in this specific instance.
Mm-hmm. And in our societies, Caribbean societies, societies coming out of enslavement, rituals have become, in the eyes of even the African and the African descendant, demonic things to eschew, things to shun. Help us to understand, how did we get to this place that as Africans, our response and our views of rituals, African rituals, because then there are other rituals that we participate in, but that any rituals coming out of Africa, that they have become what so many of our people call sinful. How did we get here?
Yeah, I think that's perhaps the most important question we need to ask ourselves, and it's very urgent that we answer it and answer it correctly. Mm-hmm. In order to understand that question, I think we need to put it in the context in which it was first raised in the life of our people. Mm-hmm. And we talk here now about the Holocaust of African people, more specifically, first, the Arab invasion and destruction of Africa, using or abusing, if you wish, the Arab religion of Islam, and secondly, the European invasion and destruction of Africa, using or abusing, if you wish, the religion of Christianity. Now, most of us in the Caribbean are familiar with European oppression, whether or not we recognize it or we always recognize its symptoms among us. So I'm going to deal with that. Mm-hmm. When Europeans terrorized and kidnapped our ancestors, enslaved them, and shipped them from Africa to the Caribbean and other places, they forced us to work for lashes instead of wages, in the words of Eric Wilming. What were they trying to do? Their primary purpose was to exploit us, our labor power, our mental power, and so on. In order to do that, they had two basic choices. They could use force, physical force all the time, and that meant that they wouldn't be able to sleep. They'll have to have guards all the while. The other way is mental enslavement, which is the most fundamental and effective form of enslavement. Because once you convince somebody that he or she was inferior to you and you were superior to them and that they need to be doing what you tell them to do all the time, you don't need any physical guards. Mm-hmm. And essentially, this is what happened to African people. Through the introduction of a certain form of Christianity and other ideologies, we have been convinced that anything African is negative and everything European is positive. Now, this is a kind of crude way of putting it, mm-hmm. or a kind of inexact way of putting it, but essentially this is what happened. Yes. And therefore, anything African was said to be bad and negative, and anything European was said to be good mm-hmm. and healthy. And we've come to some very ridiculous extent about this, and I'm just going to give us one or two. Yes. What we call opiate today, which is really African psychology and social psychology, mm-hmm. is being given a bad name. Yes. Europeans banned it, they criminalized it. And if you're caught doing it, you're supposed to be some evil person. Now, two things happened when they banned it. And one is something that we don't often recognize. A lot of charlatans, people who really didn't know, started to try to practice it in order to have monetary gains, to exploit the fellow African people. Mm-hmm. And all of that was lumped under the supposedly genuine thing. The other thing that happened is that we were criminalized. We lost the full knowledge and practice of that branch of African science. We also lost the system through which we licensed, if you wish, the practitioners. Because in African tradition, you didn't just set up and say, I want to be a spiritualist. You have to have a long apprenticeship in which you were supervised by experts. And if you performed well enough, you were then certified, if you wish. Mm-hmm. So all of this happened under the torture of European colonialism. Yes. The next example I want to give is one closer to home. We in African tradition have always honored our ancestors and been in touch with them. This is a very powerful way of being ourselves and so on. Now, Europeans have persuaded us that the appropriation of our ancestors is a bad thing. They call it ancestor worship. We don't worship our ancestors. Mm-hmm. We praise them. We looked up to them. Mm-hmm. But Europeans have persuaded us that this is a bad thing and get us to abandon it. But hey, they get us to worship their ancestors. John, Paul, Mary, Jesus. And this is the kind of illogical and ridiculous, shocking thing that we have come into. And I know that some of our listeners might be horrified. He says Jesus is a white ancestor. Yes. Europeans have made Jesus into a white person and get us to worship him. Yes. And that's the ridiculous contradiction that we're in. So those are two good
background of his own work and his own scholarship, libation and African ritual of heritage in the circle of life. With so much to Dr. Nehusian, we hope to tap into as many aspects of him as possible before he leaves this morning. So let's go back quickly, because you mentioned Obia. It's something that we have been talking about in the spaces here. And one of the things you said is that as a result of the criminalization of Obia, that charlatans rose up, and that the way that that spiritual system would have been set up, that there is a protocol to it, there is a strategy to it, and this is something, though, that we are not really aware of. And so if you could spend a minute or two explaining how that works and how that would have worked had Obia not been criminalized.
Well, Mr. Kabu, if Obia had not been criminalized, it would have been a very, very important progressive aspect of our existence in the Caribbean. Obia is roughly what we may call psychology, the practice of psychology. This is a crude term because we're using a European term to describe an African concept. The way in which knowledge was passed on from generation to generation in Africa was substantially, though not only, through practice as well as study and reflection. Now, what this meant in the case of the arts and science that we call Obia today is that if I, for example, wanted to specialize in that area, I didn't just go and say, well, you know, I'm a practitioner, I'm an Obia man. No, I had to attach myself to a mentor, somebody who was an expert in the field, and that person had to accept me. So we had an agreement with me as the novice coming in to learn about this area, and somebody who was already established and an expert in it. I would learn from that person, and that person would teach me. Usually what happened is that the learner, me in this case, would have been inserted directly into a living situation where we could begin the practice and the learning. What that meant is that I would have been asked to go to the person's home or their place of practice. Usually what happened is that they wouldn't give me any specific instruction. They'd just come along, you come along.
Yes.
And they would look at me, at my attitude. So, for example, if the place needed a good sweep out and I didn't pick up a broom and sweep out, I wouldn't get a good mark. Mm-hmm. Now, this is important because our ancestors understood very clearly that attitude is far more important than the knowledge we possess.
Yes.
And this is something that some of us have trouble with. You know, our ancestors understood that knowledge is to be used for the betterment of our people, of our community. So for them, you could go to school and, you know, get the highest degree or about to get the highest degree. But if you walk past the elders and didn't greet them or greet them properly, it was, you know, you could be failed on that. Mm-hmm. Because your whole ethics, your social attitude, the values that you live, yes, was far more important than the isolated bits of knowledge that you may have been in possession of. Mm-hmm. So that would be a very important thing for them. Yeah. And if they found that my attitude was okay, then they would start to show me things and ask me to reflect on things. So sometimes I would have to be observing them in practice. And after a while, they would encourage me to tell them what I thought about why they did this, blah, blah, blah. I'd be encouraged to ask questions. And so I'll begin to learn and reflect on the practice.
Dr. Nehusi, I want to segue a bit. It's going to be on the side a bit, but something you said makes me want to go there. I'll come forward to libation in a minute. And that is, to what extent do you think, and within your own capacity as scholarship, as your work focusing on linguistics and ancient Egyptian linguistic dispersal and so on, to what extent do you think that the loss of language has contributed to the loss of the values you talk about that we have lost, the understanding of who we are, in terms of the extent to which a language would have been prescriptive? What have we lost? How much have we lost in losing the language, our language?
Well, in losing our language, we've lost a substantial part of our culture and therefore of ourselves. A language is a record of and a witness to people's perceptions, their values, their presence and progress in history, in reality. And if we lose our language, therefore we lose a lot. I do not think that people in the Caribbean have lost completely our languages. Our situation is made desperate by the fact that we've been taught to devalue our language.
Yes.
So too many of us don't see the value in Patois or Creole or whatever we call it. You know, and by the way, it's not a broken language.
Of course.
It's a language. No language is broken. And if we even listen to Bob Marley, and when he uses some of the wisdom sayings that come out of African languages, we could be really well educated. And I'm positing Marley because he is a point of reference for us. Most of us know his works or know them enough to be able to recognize what I'm saying. But he doesn't represent the fullness, all the examples of the language in Jamaica or in the Caribbean. And just to recognize Bob's contribution by repeating and holding up the wisdom sayings in the language is a tremendous thing, and it indicates just how much we could get from our language, or a proper appreciation of our language.
Because recently, well, I suppose persons knew before, but in the last few years for myself in this space, I rediscovered the word uno. You know, a huno, meaning the same thing as Ubuntu, a Shona word, where that's a word that is in our everyday speech here on the island. We say uno 6, 7, 8, 9 times per hour. You know, so that's embedded in us. And I've been thinking of the extent to which our ancestors left that word, for us to discover. And then to understand the meaning, and where understanding the meaning of that, where that would take us in terms of how we even engage with each other, the rituals that we would participate in, the way we would praise our ancestors, the way we would deal with community. You know, these are some other things going through my mind. If we understood, if we begin to re-embrace that one word in particular.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. I mean, we could begin with the smallest meaning of that. In a certain way, it's the Igbo. It comes from the Igbo, you, which is you plural, and it announces community, like you've been hinting at. And people in Barbados have a certain form of that word, the same word that they say too. And, you know, just to recognize that, to me, is of a great value, because it points towards a common origin and common understanding of reality. And you find similar things happening in Africa. They're different words in different languages, but they mean the same thing.
Yes.
And we have not been studying ourselves and our traditions from this common approach, if I might call it that, or doing that enough, But some scholars are beginning to do that kind of work, and we're discovering. I mean, you mentioned Ubuntu. I mean, there's a certain way in which Ubuntu, Ma'at, and there are other terms in different African languages. They mean the same thing. And we've got to rediscover ourselves, the work of our ancestors. And so join them up, if I might put it that way. And so have a sweeping understanding of ourselves as a people. We are the same people. We come from the same place. We have the same origin. We have fundamentally the same culture. Some of us are defeated and confused by variations in our culture. But I tell people that African people are the oldest people in the world. It means our history is the longest history. And the tremendous span of space and time. Africa is the second largest continent in the world, and our people are spread out throughout Africa and beyond Africa. So if we occupy this huge space for this great length of time, variation is going to be something that's part of our practice, because that's just reality. Things will vary. And to me, the outstanding thing, surprising even, is that we are still substantially so much the same that if we just look at ourselves, really, and see what's there, we're going to see the tremendous similarities among our people.
And let's go now to libation, because as it's all connected. And your work is brilliant. I think for most of us Pan-Africans and others students of history and culture, that it is your work that informs us when it comes to libation. And I want to go there in terms of your own research. Historically, can you situate libation for us historically? We say this is an African ritual when we talk here on the island. But from your scholarship, this is as far back as time, isn't it?
Yes. From perhaps the earliest ideas, the earliest information we have about ourselves as African people, it suggests, I'm not absolutely certain, but it suggests that libation was part of our rituals, our daily rituals. Now, what I found out is that libation was originally part of a number of rituals. And as things develop, as societies develop, these things became fused. But some of them are still identifiable as different rituals because of the fact that they are practiced independently, although on many occasions, especially grand ones, they become part of one elaborate ritual. Now, libation is what we call drink offering. And we know for certain that this is one of those rituals that was taken into Kemet from higher up and to the south of Kemet by Africans who migrated into what would become Kemet, ancient Egypt. So we're talking about 6,000 and more years ago. And we absolutely certain that this ritual was practiced even before then. So, it has a huge time span in terms of the attested existence.
What's the purpose of libation?
Well, there are several purposes of libation. One is to give thanks and praises. So, God, our people had, let's say, the Creator might be a more appropriate term. To the Creator, to our ancestors, for being alive. We may also give thanks and praises to the Creator, to the ancestors, to any other person or being necessary for the completion of whatever we are giving thanks and praises for. So, for example, we might have been successful at an examination. We give thanks and praises always to the Creator, to the ancestors, to fighters who fought for us to receive education or the right to education, to our teachers who actually taught us, of course, to our parents also, who said you must go to school, who provided the physical means, clothes and books and so on, as well as the motivation. So we give thanks for those things. We might have just completed building a house, for example. Again, we give thanks and praises. But that's not all for the use of a libation or the purpose. Mm-hmm. We may also pour a libation to maintain contact and balance with the world around us, spiritually as well as otherwise. So some people do it every morning at a certain point in time. One of the first things we do after we have a ritual cleansing is libation. In this case, libation also is a powerful psychological and organizing tool because it encourages us to reflect upon what we wish to accomplish in the upcoming day. So we actually envisage what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. In other words, we envisage the challenges we may be facing in trying to accomplish what task we set ourselves for this upcoming day. So libation is so powerful in these ways. Mm-hmm. As I'm on it, I think I should also say that libation is a way of bringing together spiritually everybody who is concerned with that moment. Mm-hmm. And therefore, in a libation, we don't only salute, appropriate, encourage the presences of the Creator, the lesser divinities, our ancestors, who were generally known as fighters like Marcus Garvey. We also encourage ancestors who are important to the specific thing that we're doing, like I mentioned just now. Mm-hmm. But there are people who are alive in this realm of reality who may not be physically present, but who would have agreed with the ritual. And therefore, we summon their presence there also. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we mention that for some of our listeners who know Just a Moment of Silence by Nas. Mm-hmm. There's a part where he is talking about the homies who are in jail. Yes. They're not there physically. They're locked away behind bars. But he say, hey, we need a moment of silence because we need to salute our brothers and sisters who are alive, but they're not here with us. They're in jail. Mm-hmm. I think there's a powerful illustration of what I mean when I say those of us who are alive, they're not physically present, but are spiritually present because either they know about the ritual or in any case would have agreed with it.
Mm-hmm. How important is it then to understand spirit and what role does spirituality play in the libation ceremonies and even the symbolic meanings embedded within the libation ceremonies?
Well, the most important or obvious one is community. We bring together Africans who have been here, our ancestors, Africans who are here, those of us in this realm of reality, and Africans who will be here, the unborn, because we always pour for the unborn also. I didn't mention them before, but, they're always part of it. So we have a community. Spirituality is a concept that we need to be a bit clearer of, usually.
Yes.
And this means the ways in which we're connected to each other. You know, that's a crude definition, but I think I'm going to leave it around there to say that all of us are connected. And it's important to understand that this is not mysterious or anything like that.
Yes.
I mean, we are connected to our ancestors where we are today because they are the people who made it possible for us to be here. And it's not only biological in the sense that, you know, they give birth to our parents who gave birth to us and so on. It's also culturally. It's their cultural creations that make us who we are, that we use to interpret ourselves and our world. Economically, materially. And our people, African people, wherever we are, dramatize usually the tremendous loss that we suffer from if our connections with our ancestors are disrupted. In other words, if our practice of spirituality is interrupted. And sometimes we're not aware of it, but we should just think about economic loss that we suffer from. Just one example, because the work that our ancestors did on the plantations of Jamaica, for example, were not adequately rewarded, and that if they were adequately rewarded, that huge sum of money as reward and property and other things would have been passed down as generational wealth from one generation to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. So right now, each one of us, each household would have been substantially well off, far better than we are today. And this is just one example of how a disrupted conversation, communication among the generations. In other words, if we cut off from our ancestors, what could happen? And this usually is the result of the disruption of African spirituality. And that's why our staunchest resistance to oppression have always had an element of spirituality among them.
And I think it's critical to underscore that, as we saw with Bookman Doty and Cecile Fatiman and them in Haiti, and then here in Jamaica, opium was made illegal in Jamaica because of the wars fought by Chief Tachi. And so in terms of, and he had the very same practices, libation. You mentioned at the top of this, talking about libation, the different rituals that seem to have been fused together in some way, and that we're seeing what we're experiencing now, what we see as libation now, comes out of a pantheon, if you will, of rituals. Would something like what Bookman Doty did in Haiti, what Chief Tachi did here in Jamaica, be part of that wider rituals that would include libation?
Yeah, I'll mention the set of rituals that, as we know them today in a moment. But I want to take a moment first to emphasize something. Well, two things, actually. One is that our oppressors were very wicked people, ungodly, but they weren't stupid. And we need to take that in, because they understood very clearly that an African who remained in practice of African culture is not somebody you could defeat or defeat easily.
Right.
And the history of our people in Haiti and Jamaica illustrates that very much. It's not coincidental that the people in Haiti are in possession of voodoo, or that our oppressors are trying their best to demonize voodoo. That's what was used to defeat them. It's the same with Mayal and other things in Jamaica.
Yes.
You know, Tachi was strong because he was ritually and culturally strong. And to be culturally strong means that you must know your ritual. So I wanted to emphasize that for our listeners and for our own understanding of the supreme importance of ritual and culture in general.
Yes.
Libation was part of a number of other rituals and still is part when things are good. In other words, our culture is together. There's first fruits, where you give praise to, again, the Almighty, the lesser divinities, the ancestors, and so on, for, excuse me, for the first fruits you reap from the harvest, for the best you get from the hunt, and so on.
Let me take a break, Dr. Nehusi, so that you can take a sip of water. Let me take a break.
Okay, thank you.
Mass, no difficulties. Mistakes, failures. Claim no easy victory.
All right, in the words of Amilcar Cabral, we're claiming no easy victory. But here the thing is, we're exposing lies wherever they're told, because one of the things that we have been told is that for us, libation is sinful. And then so many of us refuse to even enter events and spaces and places where libation is taking place. Dr. Nehusi has written a seminal work, Libation, an African Ritual of Heritage in the Circle of Life. He's back with us on the phone lines. His book delves into the symbolic meanings, and you hear us talking about that embedded within the act of libation itself. And Dr. Nehusi has been telling us about how libation is really a bridge between, and can be seen as a bridge between, the physical and the spiritual realm. Against that background, and you also talked, Dr. Nehusi, about libation serving as a means of communication with the ancestors, with deities, and we were just before we went into the break looking at how its function, the function of libation, is critical to maintaining the spiritual connections and preserving our collective memory, as far back as Bukmanduti and as close to us as Bukmanduti, and as far back as those who went from the West and other parts of Africa into ancient Kemet with the practice. Such an ancient practice, a spiritual practice. And yet, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, something that is regarded among many of our people, too many of our people, as being sinful. We had a conversation just recently, Dr. Nehusi, where you pointed out that even within the biblical texts, there are examples of libation.
Yes, and I think it's critical for us to understand that. And it shows how illogical and treacherous, really, is this whole notion that libation is a sinful thing passed on to us by people who call themselves Christians. I'll leave it up to real Christians to decide if lies and misrepresentation is really part of Christianity. However, I think it's important for us to recognize that libation is mentioned in the Christian Bible at least 63 times. I want to repeat this, that libation is mentioned in the Christian Bible at least 63 times. And it's mentioned as drink offering, singular, and drink offerings, plural. Libation is a drink offering because you offer drink to whosoever you're offering to. The creator, the lesser divinities, ancestors, and so on. So libation is in the Bible at least 63 times. Here's the problem. If it was such a sinful thing, why is it in the Bible? And this points towards a larger truth that Christianity needs to be honest about and answer. Much of the Christian doctrine comes from Africa, from African people. just going to leave it there because I want you to tell me where to go next in all of this.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting point that you raise. It's an ongoing conversation here on the island, because one of the issues that we're faced with now, and we hear the discussions in many spaces, is whether or not the information that's coming out of Kemet, that has come out of Kemet from Egyptologists like yourself, we're seeing the powers that be and the authorities on the continent, in Egypt, Arab Egypt, if you will, walking back a lot of that work that has been done, the research from yourself, from people like Van Sertima, from people like Dr. Ben, Sheikh Hunter Diop, and so many others, and making it a crime to reference the history, or the African history, the black history, if you will, of Egypt, even on the continent of Africa and outside of the continent of Africa. So if you would respond to that, and I'm not sure if you're aware of what's going on. I was in Egypt They're literally arresting people. I'm just, a few months ago coming back from Egypt, where this is what we faced. We had to be very careful what we said and where we said it.
Yeah, I mean, any oppressor attempts to control knowledge. That's why obeah was banned in Jamaica. That's why many African practices have been demonized. And the Arab invaders of Egypt and the oppressors of African people in Egypt and Sudan and other parts of North Africa, Arab people who do that, I'm not saying that all Arab people do that, but I'm saying that this is something endemic in Arab culture. They are no different from Europeans on this particular issue. And our people must know that the current Arab occupiers of Egypt and the rest of North Africa were not or are not the ancient Egyptians. The ancient Egyptians are African people. And you don't have to be any, person with three brains to understand this. We just need to look at the history of Egypt and the rest of North Africa, and we're going to see that the current Arab population in that part of Africa predominates from the 7th century AD, when Arab people, there was an exodus to that part of the world from Arabia shortly after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him. So there's no mystery. The people who lived in Kemet before then were substantially African people. They had enclaves of Greeks and Romans and so on. But we also know that these ancient Egyptians were African because of the culture. The language is an African language. They practice libation, the naming system. I mean, almost anything you could think about culturally African, it's part of ancient Egypt, and we could spend untold numbers of hours discussing that. These are no mysteries. And these are things that are known. Yeah. So the current Arab occupiers of Egypt, they want to lay claim to the intellectual heritage of African people. They would want people to believe, and they perhaps have persuaded themselves, that, for example, they built the pyramids. Those are not the people who built the pyramids. And our ancestors were very clear about the distinctions between us and them. There's a passage in which our ancestors, this is written in ancient Egyptian, but it's been translated many times, where they said, the vile Amu. Amu is the name that our people used in ancient Egypt to call the Arab people. And the proclamation was very clear that there was cultural difference between them and us. So we know all of these things.
Yes.
And because Arab people physically occupy what used to be Kemet today, they want the world and themselves to believe that they're the ones who've always been there. But it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And they persecute people who disagree with them. I mean, recently they banned a show by an African-American artist because they claim that he was associated with a film on Netflix on Cleopatra. And I know some of the scholars who advise on that work.
Mm-hmm.
And these are well-trained people,
Yes.
But this is the kind of intellectual thuggery that some Arab people engage in because they want to oppress our people. And it's for us to know our own history.
And intellectual thuggery is the correct term. We saw just in Egypt when we were there last summer, big concerts, Kevin Hart and others, were cancelled because they were labeled pro. It's an interesting label that they've put on them now, on us actually. And they say we're anti-Egypt, we're pro-black, and there's a whole lot of labels. But that takes me to in the few minutes that we have left to kind of bring this to the wider theme that we're focusing on this morning and for the month of May, which is what are we going to tell our children about their future? How important is it to have these conversations with our children? But as you have done in the book, looking at and exploring the contemporary relevance of libation in the face of modern challenges, how do we bring all of that information and what's the importance of bringing all of that information to the now as we begin to prepare our children for the future?
Well, there are several ways of articulating that. And one is, if you don't know your past, where you're coming from, you won't know for certain where you are. And if you don't know where you are, you won't know where you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
On top of all of that is this. If we do not know who we are, then we will not know what our interests, our real interests are. And if we don't know or we are uncertain about our real interests, we cannot do the best job or even a good job at protecting those interests, defending them, and advancing them. So fundamentally, if we don't know who we are, everything else about ourselves becomes suspect, in the very least suspect. So self-knowledge and self-understanding is one of the most fundamental things that we need as a person and as a people. And therefore, we need to understand our past. It doesn't mean that all of us must be PhDs in African history, but it means that we must understand ourselves, at least in outline, and things like libation must be important to us, and we must understand its importance, because it's one of those things that performs all the functions I outlined or at least mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to all of that, libation brings balance, psychological and otherwise, to our lives.
Mm-hmm.
It puts us in tune with ourselves, with our family, our surroundings, our ancestors, and so on. This is ma'at. Mm-hmm. Libation was always about maintaining ma'at, a balance in ourselves, in our families, in our communities, in our nation, in the cosmos. because our ancestors understood very clearly that if you have an interdependent cosmos as we have today, and we've always had, and if, as our bodies are complex, you have different organs and so on, if something goes wrong with any one aspect of ourselves or the wider reality, our family, our community, our nation, the environment, if something goes wrong with any one aspect and we do not take action to bring that aspect back in balance with the others, then we have created a problem that will explode in our faces. We don't have time for it, I suspect, but the example of environmentalism is a very important one.
Take a few minutes and go there, Dr. Nehusi.
Okay. Well, I mean, to give you it in broad strokes, when Europeans invaded Africa, our people had a system of environmentalism. We didn't call it that, but that's what it's called today. And that was demonstrated in many ways. So, for example, if you were a hunter and you wanted to go hunting, let's say, deer, before you set out, you had to pour a libation. So the divinity concerned to the forest and so on, and make the solemn promise, if you wish, take an oath that you will not take more from Mother Nature than you needed. And what this meant is that if you saw 4 deer in the forest and your family need 2, you wouldn't try to shoot all 22 of them. Our relationship to nature was regulated by need and not by greed. We also had sacred groves. In a sacred grove, you went to retreat and be by yourself, to appropriate divinities and so on. But here's something else about a sacred grove. You didn't cut down anything. So, in terms of life forms, our people had a system of ensuring that no wanton destruction took place.
Yes.
Here's another part of that system. I'm talking now about what is called totems. And this has a connection to names, but let's just stick with the part that's relevant to environmentalism. Every family, village, and so on, community had a totem. And what that meant was that usually you didn't kill or eat the totem. You interacted with it only in certain ways. So in one village, the totem might have been the deer. So the deer was not killed and eaten in that area. What that meant in practice was that the deer was a protected species in that area.
Yes.
In the next village, the totem might have been the cow or the snake or the tortoise, whatever. It meant that that animal, or it could have been a plant, was a protected and therefore a preserved species in that area. So, in general, a patchwork of species protection and preservation spread itself across the land without a single fence or a gun. This is environmentalism in practice.
Yes.
And all our children were brought up in that system. Flick your television to today, and you're going to see that wherever environmentalism in our lands, including Africa and Jamaica, is talked about, it's invariably some white person or their representative. And you don't find Africa anywhere.
That is quite true.
Essentially,
yes.
Sorry.
No.
Let me just say this one sentence.
Yes.
Essentially what happens is that these people who murder animals, like the bison in North America, they go and shoot animals for sport. This is murdering animals for sport, on environmentalism. They cut down trees and did all kinds of environmental damage. Now that the earth is threatened with extinction, some of them have suddenly discovered environmentalism. But these were the people who were saying African people are backward and be stupid because we worship rocks and trees and so on when we were preserving them. So it's important for our people to understand the broad sweep of history and see that our indigenous knowledge system had environmentalism as part of it, and that these despoilers are the ones who cause a whole lot of destruction in this way. I'm sorry if I deflected you for a moment.
No, we're quite good. We're good. This is because we needed to hear that in the space this morning. This is something that it's relevant to Jamaica. I know people are listening to us all across the world, and it is relevant to us wherever we are as African people, specifically continental Africa and those here on the within the Caribbean region. I want to wrap quickly because we're totally out of time, and I know I've kept you beyond time, Dr. Nehusi. But just to bring it all back together now, in terms of how we relate to each other, how we praise our ancestors, how we engage in rituals, the significance of libation in this process. How can libation help that process, assist that process?
Well, libation can help because when we practice libation, I think it's important for us to be communal in it. Anybody and everybody should be involved in it, and there are ways in which people could be involved. For example, you have a communal cup. Whatever is the liquid you use, the pour libation could be collected in a receptacle, and everybody takes a sip at the end of it, or you just tip a few drops on the floor if it's something you don't drink, usually white rum. And this is a community thing. In London, where we used to have, and I think we still do, a tremendous libation at the end of African Liberation Day ceremonies, Kwanzaa, and so on. We would sing Bob Marley's song, redemption song, as part of our closing out. Yes. And this is a community sing out. So these are ways of involving everybody, and when you participate in a libation like that as a community event, you all feel part of each other. It's a way of bringing the community together. And I think these are important ways. Our people have always been communal, Even in the church that calls itself Christian, there's a distinctive style of preaching where there's an African preacher, and he or she would preach, and the community would respond. It's call and response. You see them singing and drumming and all over the place.
Yes. Most definitely. I remember growing up very young, in the hills of St. Mary, that I remember the men who would drink Red Stripe beer would say, the first time I heard the word libation, I was very, very young. Because they would say, before they take a sip, they would say, I have to do a libation, and they would pour some on the ground. And people would laugh. But that's the first time I heard this. And it wasn't until much later that I began to recognize exactly what libation is. And the very, very simple, small part of the culture and of our heritage that was maintained, retained in the hills of St. Mary. It's phenomenal, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that kind of thing has been retained elsewhere. Throughout the Americas, libation was retained, persisted as in a deformed state, a very abbreviated state, because libation is could be a very elaborate ritual, certainly usually more elaborate than just tipping out a few drops on the floor or on the ground. Yes. but it was disrupted by our enslavers. Mm-hmm. And our ancestors were so ingenious that they stripped the ritual down to the most essential part, which is just pouring out a few drops and saying things like, for those who are not here. And we know who they mean, or they knew who they mean for those who are not here.
Yes.
Because that's all they could do in the limited space on a plantation, because to do any elaborate ritual was to risk death.
Yes.
You know.
And so the question is, I'm keeping you on the line, and I'm going to get in trouble too because
it's okay with me. It's your program.
Because I have a commercial break, but I want to do this one thing, which is to say then, because the promise of emancipation has not been realized, there's just so much more work to be done on our part. We talked about the laws that are still on the book, the colonial laws that are still on the book last week, but then. What is our role then in moving forward, especially within the context we're talking about of restoring the ceremony of libation? Is the simplest way that I can ask this question this morning. What's our role in this? What's our responsibility?
Well, our role and responsibility is in popularizing it. It's a general term, but we have to bring understanding and greater and deeper understanding of libation and indeed of all African culture back to our own selves and our people. And we've got to make this the practice of our lives. Everything we do should be according to African culture and rituals. And let me just say that in generality, what happened to our people during enslavement is the destruction of our culture by the imprisonment and the distortion of our minds. So liberation for us is a mental thing fundamentally, and we will only be liberated when we take back all aspects of our minds. In other words, we cannot be celebrating Arab and European culture, their holidays and so on, and still expect to be free. I mean, let's look at Jamaica. What's the holidays in Jamaica? Is there any African holiday in an island that is 90% plus African people? Now, these are the stark contradictions that announce how mentally imprisoned many of us still are. Yeah. We celebrate Christmas and so on. You know, do we celebrate Africa? We celebrate Easter. Do we celebrate Africa? And here's one of the most damning things about Christmas and Easter and many other things. These things come out originally from African traditions, African practices. But tell that to our people. We just don't know. You know, Easter was part of an African ceremony, festival. Today it's called Carnival. You know, and Carnival always had a spiritual aspect where you had abstinence and so on. When that festival was taken from Africa in ancient times to Europe by Europeans, it quickly got out of hand, licentiousness and so on. So the church tried to control it. But they couldn't control it. It was so deeply embedded in the ordinary folk in Europe. So what did the church try to do? They tried to bring it inside the church so they could control it. That's how we got Easter in the church today. Well, and it was very distorted from how people had it. Go ahead.
Dr. Nehusi, I'm going to have, as I told you, I'm going to invite you back. I hope we can have many of these conversations. We just managed to touch a tip of your scholarship, and I hope that you are available to come back many times to have these conversations with us. I really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to sharing some of what I know with you and your audience.
Thank you. Dr. Kimani Nehusi. Will definitely be hearing much more from Dr. Nehusi in this space many, many, many Sundays to come because his scholarship is wide and it is deep and it is deep and it is wide. So there's a whole lot to learn from him. Let's take a break.
Fairs claim no easy victory.